Caleb Thornton's hands had killed 23 men. Now those same hands trembled as he lifted a dying baby from her dead mother's arms. The infant weighed nothing. Less than his pistol. Less than his guilt. And somewhere behind him, her 2-year-old brother was screaming a sound that would haunt Caleb for the rest of his life. He had 3 days to reach town. 3 days through a Colorado blizzard with 2 children who needed everything he didn't know how to give. This is the story of how mercy shattered a broken man and rebuilt his soul. Stay with me until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story of hope and redemption can travel across the world. The wind hit like a fist when Caleb Thornton crested the ridge. He pulled his collar higher and squinted through the swirling snow. Something was wrong. He'd been tracking silence for the last mile. No birdsong, no animal sounds, just the howl of wind and his own breathing. Then he saw the wagon. "Easy, Shadow," he murmured to his horse. His hand moved to the colt at his hip. Habit. 12 years of hunting men had made that motion as natural as breathing. The wagon sat crooked on the trail below its canvas top shredded. One wheel was shattered. And the bodies, Caleb counted 6. Maybe 7. Hard to tell with the snow already covering them. He should ride on. Every instinct screamed it. Nothing down there but death and trouble, and he'd had enough of both to last 10 lifetimes. But something held him there on that ridge. Maybe it was the small boot he could see sticking out from behind a barrel, a child's boot. "Damn it," he said to no one. He nudged Shadow down the slope. The scene was worse up close. 2 men lay near the front of the wagon, shot through the chest. A woman, gray-haired, maybe 50, had fallen across a wooden crate, her arms still stretched toward something she'd been trying to reach. Another woman, younger, lay face down near the back wheel, and the child's boot belonged to a boy, maybe 4 years old. Dead. Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd seen worse, had done worse once during the war. But children. A sound cut through the wind. He froze. There it was again. A whimper. Weak. Barely human. Caleb drew his pistol and moved toward the sound. It was coming from beneath the young woman's body. He holstered his weapon and dropped to his knees beside her. She was cold dead for hours at least, but the sound was coming from underneath her. Carefully, gently, he rolled her onto her back. 2 faces stared up at him. Babies. Twins by the look of them. A boy and a girl wrapped in a single blanket now stained with frozen blood. The girl's mouth was open in a silent cry. The boy just watched Caleb with eyes too old for his tiny face. "Jesus Christ," Caleb breathed. The mother had used her body as a shield. She'd covered them so completely that the raiders must have missed them in their hurry. She'd died protecting them, and they'd survived. But for how long? The girl found her voice and let out a wail that seemed to split the sky. Caleb's hands hovered over the infants, uncertain. He'd held guns and knives and the throats of men who'd wronged him. But babies. "All right," he said, his voice rough. "All right, let's get you out of there." He lifted the girl first. She weighed nothing less than his pistol, less than the rope he carried for bounties. Her cry intensified the moment he touched her small fists, pumping the air. "I know, little one. I know." The boy came easier. He didn't cry, didn't make a sound, just kept watching Caleb with those knowing eyes. Caleb stood slowly. Both babies pressed against his chest and looked around at the massacre. What the hell was he supposed to do now? He couldn't leave them. Even he wasn't that far gone. But he couldn't care for them either. He didn't know the first thing about babies. Didn't know what they ate or how often or what made them stop crying. The nearest town was Copper Ridge. 3 days east through the mountains. In good weather. This wasn't good weather. Caleb looked down at the girl screaming in his arms. Her face was red with effort, but her lips were turning blue. The cold was already getting to her. "Your mama was brave," he said quietly, looking at the woman who'd saved them. "Real brave. She died for you. I won't let that mean nothing." He began searching the wreckage with one arm, the other holding both babies against his chest. Found a leather satchel with baby bottles. Found a tin of milk powder. Found swaddling clothes and tiny gowns, and buried under a smashed crate a Bible with a name written inside. Cooper. Thomas and Martha Cooper. Samuel and Lily, Caleb read aloud. The babies' names written in careful feminine script. Samuel and Lily Cooper, Lee. The girl Lily was still crying but weaker now. That scared him more than the screaming had. He had to move. Caleb fashioned a rough sling from a torn blanket binding Samuel against his chest so his hands would be free. Lily he tucked inside his coat pressed against his heart where his body heat might keep her alive. "Hang on," he told them. "Both of you. Just hang on." He mounted Shadow and turned east toward Copper Ridge toward a town he'd been planning to avoid for the rest of his life. Behind him, the bodies of Thomas and Martha Cooper and 5 others disappeared beneath the falling snow. Ahead, nothing but white. The first night nearly killed them. Caleb found shelter in a hollow between 2 boulders barely big enough for him and Shadow, and 2 babies who wouldn't stop crying. He built a fire with numb fingers, melted snow in a tin cup, and tried to figure out how to mix the milk powder. His hands shook so badly he spilled half of it. "Come on," he muttered. "Come on, come on." Lily latched onto the bottle nipple with desperate strength, sucking so hard he worried she'd choke. Samuel took his more carefully, those dark eyes never leaving Caleb's face. "You're the quiet one, aren't you?" Caleb said. "Your sister does all the talking." Samuel just watched him. After they'd eaten, Caleb changed their soiled cloths, a process that left him gagging and cursing and wondering how anyone survived infancy, and wrapped them in every piece of dry fabric he could find. Then he sat with his back against the boulder, both babies cradled in his arms, and stared into the fire. 12 years ago, he'd held another baby like this. His daughter, Rosie. She'd been 3 months old when he'd last seen her. He'd kissed her forehead, promised Clara he'd be home within the week, and ridden out after the Dale brothers. He'd never seen either of them again. Caleb's throat tightened. He could still see Rosie's face, Clara's nose, his eyes, that tuft of dark hair that stuck up no matter how Clara smoothed it. Dead. Both of them. Because he'd chosen revenge over protection. And now, here he was holding 2 more babies who depended on him. 2 more lives he could fail. "I'm not the right man for this," he said aloud, his voice cracking. "I'm not. I don't know what I'm doing. Your mama should be here. Your papa. Not me. I'm the last person who should—" Lily made a small sound and curled her fist into his shirt. Just grabbed hold and hung on like she knew. Like she understood that he was all she had. Something cracked inside Caleb's chest. "All right," he whispered. "All right. I'll get you to town. I'll find someone who knows what they're doing. Someone who can—" He stopped. Samuel had fallen asleep, his small body going limp against Caleb's arm. And Lily. Lily was watching him now. Her crying finally stopped, her eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that seemed impossible for something so small. "What?" Caleb asked her. "What do you want from me?" She just watched. And Caleb, who hadn't cried since the night he'd buried his wife and daughter in a single grave, felt tears burning behind his eyes. The second day brought trouble. They were picking their way along a narrow canyon trail when Shadow suddenly balked, ears flat against his head. Caleb's hand went to his gun. "What is it, boy?" The rattle came a split second before the strike. The snake lunged from a crevice in the rock wall, fangs sinking into Shadow's foreleg. The horse screamed and reared. Caleb grabbed for the babies, but the motion threw him off balance. He hit the ground hard. For a moment, everything went white. Pain exploded through his shoulder, his hip, his head, where it cracked against a rock. Then Samuel was screaming, really screaming, not the whimpering cry of a hungry baby, but the terrified shriek of a child who'd just watched his world end once and was watching it end again. Caleb rolled, covering both babies with his body, and looked up to see Shadow staggering away, foam flying from his mouth. The snake had retreated into the rocks. He could hear its rattle, a sound like death laughing. "No," Caleb gasped. "No, no, no." He pushed himself to his knees, checked the babies both crying, but unhurt, and stumbled toward his horse. Shadow went down 30 yards up the trail. The big animal's eyes were already glazing, his breathing labored. Caleb knelt beside him, one hand on the horse's neck, feeling his pulse flutter and fade. "I'm sorry, boy," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Shadow gave one last shuddering breath and went still. Caleb stayed there for a long moment, kneeling in the snow beside his dead horse, listening to two babies cry behind him and feeling the weight of his situation crush down on his shoulders. No horse, low on supplies, a day and a half from town at least. With two infants who needed care he couldn't provide. This was how it ended, not in a gunfight, not with a bullet through his heart, but here in this nameless canyon, trying to save two children he didn't even know. He thought about his daughter, about Rosie, who'd died without ever knowing her father loved her. About Clara, who'd died waiting for him to come home. He thought about the letter he'd been carrying for 12 years, the one Clara had written him before the wedding. The one that ended with, "Come back to me. That's all I ask. Just come back." He hadn't, and she'd died. But these babies, Samuel and Lily Cooper, they weren't dead yet. Caleb stood. His body screamed in protest. His head throbbed. His shoulder felt like someone had driven a spike through it. But he stood. "Not like this," he said through clenched teeth. "Not like this." He salvaged what he could from Shadow's saddlebags, the milk powder, the bottles, a few strips of dried meat, his canteen. Fashioned a better sling for both babies, binding them against his chest and back. Then he started walking. The second night was worse than the first. The babies wouldn't stop crying. Lily's voice had gone hoarse, reduced to a rasping whimper that sounded more like a wounded animal than a human child. Samuel had stopped making sounds altogether, which scared Caleb more than his sister's screaming. The cold was brutal. Without Shadow's warmth, without proper shelter, Caleb could feel the temperature stealing the life from all three of them 1 degree at a time. He found a shallow overhang just before dark, barely enough to keep the worst of the wind off. Built a fire with the last of his matches. Fed the babies what little milk he could mix with numb hands. Then he sat there rocking them, humming songs he barely remembered from his own childhood, and prayed to a God he'd stopped believing in 12 years ago. "Please," he whispered. "I know I got no right to ask. I know I've done things, killed men, hurt people, turned my back on everything decent. But these babies, they didn't do nothing wrong. They're innocent. They deserve better than dying in some frozen canyon with a man who don't know how to save them." Lily whimpered against his chest. "Please," Caleb said again. "If you're listening, if you ever listen to anything I said, don't let them die. Don't let me fail them like I failed." His voice broke. "Like I failed Rosie." He didn't sleep that night, just sat there holding two babies, watching the fire burn low and waiting for dawn. The third day, he saw the smoke. Just a thin ribbon rising above the ridgeline, maybe 2 miles ahead. Could be a campfire. Could be a homestead. Could be trouble. At this point, Caleb didn't care. He pushed himself to move faster, ignoring the pain in his shoulder and the dizziness that kept threatening to drop him. The babies had gone quiet, too quiet. Lily's breathing was shallow, and Samuel hadn't opened his eyes in hours. "Stay with me," Caleb kept saying. "Both of you. We're almost there. Just stay with me." The smoke led him to a wagon. Not a homesteader's camp. A single covered wagon, old but well-maintained, stopped beside a half-frozen creek. A draft horse stood nearby, and beside the fire, a woman. She saw him the same moment he saw her. Saw him stumble out of the tree line covered in snow and dried blood with two babies strapped to his chest, looking like death walking. She was on her feet, instantly moving toward him with quick, certain steps. Sir, can you hear me? Caleb tried to answer, tried to explain, but his legs chose that moment to give out, and suddenly he was on his knees in the snow, still clutching the babies, still trying to keep them warm. The babies, he managed. They need their mama wagon train massacre. The woman was already reaching for Lily, her hands practiced and gentle as she lifted the infant from the sling. She laid the baby against her shoulder, checking her with quick efficiency. She's dehydrated, the woman said. Cold, but alive. She looked at Caleb with sharp eyes. The other one, Samuel. He stopped crying hours ago. I don't know if... Let me see him. Caleb turned so she could access Samuel on his back. The woman performed the same quick assessment, her face grave, but not panicked. He's alive, weak but alive. She straightened and looked at Caleb directly. How long have you been walking? Day and a half, maybe 2. Lost my horse to a rattler. You walked through that blizzard with 2 infants. It wasn't a question, but Caleb nodded anyway. Something shifted in the woman's expression, something that might have been respect. My name is Nora Sinclair, she said. I'm a schoolteacher bound for Copper Ridge. You and these babies are coming with me. Ma'am, I can't, you don't know me. I could be anyone. A criminal, You're a man who just walked 2 days through a blizzard to save 2 children who aren't your own. Nora's voice was firm. That tells me everything I need to know. Now stop arguing and let me help you before you collapse completely. Caleb wanted to protest, wanted to maintain some shred of the independence he'd guarded so fiercely for 12 years. But Lily chose that moment to let out a weak cry, and Samuel's breathing hitched, and Caleb realized he was simply too tired, too grateful, too desperate to refuse. Caleb, he said. Caleb Thornton. And these are Samuel and Lily Cooper. Their mama died protecting them. Then they're lucky you found them, Mr. Thornton. Nora turned toward her wagon. Now come on, we need to get them warm and fed before we lose them. Caleb followed her on legs that didn't feel like his own, and as he climbed into the wagon, as Nora began heating milk and preparing blankets, as the babies finally stopped their terrible silence and started crying again. Real cries, strong cries, the cries of children who wanted to live. Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in 12 years. Hope. Small and fragile and terrifying, but hope nonetheless. Mud. The inside of Nora's wagon was cramped but organized. Crates of books lined one wall. Medical supplies occupied a small chest near the front, and in the center, a makeshift bed piled with quilts where Nora was now settling the babies. Hold her head, she instructed, handing Caleb a warmed bottle. Just like that. Let her set the pace. Lily latched on with desperate strength, milk dribbling down her chin as she drank. Her color was already improving, less gray, more pink. She's a fighter, Nora observed, working on Samuel. So is this one, though he's quieter about it. He saw it happen, Caleb said quietly. The attack. He was awake when I found him. He watched his mama die. Nora's hands stilled for just a moment. Then she continued her work, her face carefully neutral. How old is he? 2 maybe. Old enough to remember. Old enough to be traumatized. Nora's voice was soft. He'll need patience, time, someone who understands that healing isn't linear. Caleb looked at the boy, really looked at him for the first time. Samuel's eyes were open now, fixed on Caleb's face with that same unsettling intensity. I don't know nothing about healing, Caleb admitted. Only about breaking. Then maybe it's time you learned something new. The words hit him harder than they should have. He turned away, focusing on Lily, on the simple mechanics of feeding her. They sat in silence for a long moment. The only sounds were the baby's suckling and the wind howling outside. You said you were headed to Copper Ridge, Caleb finally said, for a teaching position. That's right. The territorial school board offered me a contract. Nora's tone was matter-of-fact. Fresh start, new life, all that. Running from something. She shot him a sharp look. That's a personal question, Mr. Thornton. You're right, sorry. None of my business. Another silence. Then quietly, my fiancé left me 3 days before our wedding. Ran off with another woman. The whole town knew. I couldn't... She paused, composing herself. I couldn't stay there anymore. Couldn't stand the pity. The whispers. Caleb understood that. Understood running from the wreckage of your life, from the memories that haunted every street corner. I'm sorry, he said. That's a hard thing. Yes, it is. Nora looked at him directly. What about you? What are you running from? Caleb should have deflected, should have given her some easy lie about wandering about seeing the country. But something about this woman, her directness, her competence, the way she'd taken charge without hesitation, made him want to tell the truth. 12 years ago, he said slowly, I was married, had a daughter, Rosie. She was 3 months old. Nora waited. I was a bounty hunter, good at it, made decent money. But there was this gang, the Dale brothers. 5 men, murderers, rapists. The territorial marshal put a bounty on them and I took the job. He paused, the old grief rising in his throat. I tracked them for weeks. Got close. Too close. They figured out who I was, found out where I lived. His voice went flat. They killed Clara, killed Rosie. While I was out hunting them, He couldn't finish. Nora reached over and laid her hand on his arm. Just briefly. Just enough. I spent 3 years tracking them down, Caleb continued. Killed all 5, one by one. Thought it would help. Thought it would make the pain go away. Something like that. He looked at Samuel, who'd fallen asleep with the bottle still in his mouth. It didn't. Nothing does. So I kept moving, kept taking jobs, kept running. Figured if I didn't stay anywhere too long, didn't let anyone get close. You couldn't be hurt again. Yeah. Nora withdrew her hand and returned to tending the babies. Did it work? No, Caleb admitted. It didn't work worth a damn. They fell back into silence. But something had shifted between them. Some wall had come down just a little. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, 2 babies slept peacefully for the first time in days. And 2 broken people sat together, not quite strangers anymore, wondering what the hell came next. They traveled together the next morning, Nora's wagon creaking steadily toward Copper Ridge. Caleb sat beside her on the bench, his shoulders screaming in protest, while the babies slept in their nest of blankets behind them. You'll need a doctor to look at that, Nora said, nodding toward his shoulder. It's fine. It's not fine. You can barely lift your arm. Caleb didn't argue. She was right. Copper Ridge has a good doctor, Nora continued. Dr. Foster. He's well, he has his issues, but his hands are steady when they need to be. Issues. He drinks, or used to. He's trying to stop. She paused. The war. He was a surgeon. Saw too much. Caleb understood that too. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the wind in the trees. Then, from the back, a small voice. Man! Caleb twisted around so fast, his shoulder screamed. Samuel was awake, sitting up in the blankets, his dark eyes fixed on Caleb's face. Man, the boy said again. It was the first word he'd spoken since Caleb had found him. Yeah, buddy. Caleb's voice came out rough. I'm here. Samuel stared at him for a long moment. Then very carefully, he crawled across the blankets until he was close enough to touch. He reached out one small hand and patted Caleb's arm. Man, stay. Something inside, Caleb shattered. Yeah, he whispered. Man stays. Samuel nodded once, apparently satisfied, and crawled back to curl up beside his sleeping sister. Within moments, he was asleep again. Nora was watching Caleb with an expression he couldn't read. "What?" he asked. "Nothing." But she was almost smiling. Just watching a hard man learn how to be gentle. Caleb turned back to face the road, his throat too tight to respond. But he didn't miss the way his hand kept drifting to touch Samuel's small fingers where they'd gripped his sleeve, or the way his heart kept beating the boy's words like a drum. "Man, stay. Man, stay. Man, stay." They reached Copper Ridge as the sun was setting, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of gold and rose. The town was larger than Caleb had expected. A proper main street with wooden buildings, a church with a white steeple, a general store, a saloon, and people. Lots of people all turning to stare as Nora's wagon rolled down Main Street. "Word travels fast in small towns," Nora murmured. "They'll have questions. Let them ask." A man stepped into the street ahead of them, his hand raised. He wore a sheriff's star. "Afternoon, ma'am. Sir?" The sheriff's eyes moved from Nora to Caleb to the babies visible through the wagon's opening. "Name's Jedediah Walker. Folks call me Jed. Mind telling me what brings you to Copper Ridge?" Nora introduced herself, explained about her teaching position. Then she looked at Caleb. He told the story. The massacre, the babies, the walk through the blizzard, all of it. By the time he finished, a small crowd had gathered. The sheriff's expression had shifted from suspicion to something softer. "You walked 2 days through that storm?" Walker asked. "With 2 infants. Didn't have much choice. Most men would have chosen differently." The sheriff studied him for a long moment. "You planning to stay in town long?" Caleb glanced at Samuel, who'd woken again and was watching everything with those 2 old eyes. At Lily, who'd started fussing in Nora's arms. "Depends," he said, "on what happens with the babies." "Fair enough." Walker stepped back, clearing the road. "Doc Foster's place is 2 buildings down on the left. Get those children looked at, get yourself looked at, and then come see me. We'll figure out the rest." As they drove past, a woman emerged from a building on the right, a neat establishment with a sign reading, "Hutchins Boarding House." "You'll need a place to stay," she called out. "I've got rooms, clean beds, hot food." She peered at the babies with grandmotherly concern. "And I raised 4 of my own. I know a thing or two about keeping little ones alive." "Thank you, Mrs. Hutchins, Opal Hutchins." She was already bustling toward them. "Now, let me see those angels." Caleb found himself handing Lily over before he'd consciously decided to. The old woman held the baby with practiced ease, clucking over her condition. "Poor little thing, half-starved and frozen through. We'll fix that." She looked up at Caleb with sharp eyes. "You did good bringing them here. Most men wouldn't have bothered." "I couldn't leave them." "No." Mrs. Hutchins smiled. "I don't suppose you could." She returned Lily to his arms, and the baby immediately began crying at the change, her small hands reaching back toward Caleb's chest. "She knows who saved her," Mrs. Hutchins observed. "Babies always know." Caleb looked down at Lily's scrunched-up face, her tiny fists pumping the air, and felt that crack in his heart widen a little more. "Let's get them to the doctor," he said roughly. "Then we'll figure out the rest." But as he carried Samuel and Lily toward Doc Foster's office, as Nora walked beside him, and Mrs. Hutchins called out promises of hot soup and warm beds, Caleb realized something had changed. He wasn't running anymore. For the first time in 12 years, he'd stopped moving, and he wasn't sure if that terrified him or saved him. Maybe both. Doc Foster's hands didn't shake when he examined Lily. Caleb noticed that first. The man's eyes were bloodshot, his clothes rumpled, but the moment he touched the baby, something changed. His fingers moved with surgical precision, checking her breathing, her heartbeat, the color of her skin. "How long since she's eaten properly?" Foster asked without looking up. "I've been feeding her every few hours. Milk powder mixed with water." "Temperature of the milk?" Caleb hesitated. I tested it on my wrist, like I saw my wife do once. Foster glanced at him then, a quick assessing look. You did better than most. She's dehydrated, malnourished, and she's got the start of a chest infection. But she's alive. He set Lily down gently and reached for Samuel. Let me see the boy. Samuel didn't cry when Foster examined him, just watched with those dark, knowing eyes, his small body tense but compliant. This one's stronger physically, Foster said. But he's seen things no child should see. He'll need time, patience. Will they be okay? Foster straightened and looked at Caleb directly. They'll live, if they're cared for properly. He paused. The question is, who's going to do that caring? Before Caleb could answer, Nora stepped forward. We are, for now. Foster raised an eyebrow. Mr. Thornton saved these children. I helped him get them here. Until we find them a proper home, they're our responsibility. Something flickered in Foster's tired eyes. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. The boarding house has room, he said finally. Mrs. Hutchins will help. She knows more about babies than I do. He turned to his medicine cabinet. I'll give you drops for the girl's infection. Willow bark tea for any fever. Bring them back in 3 days. Caleb reached for his wallet. What do I owe you? Nothing. Foster handed him a small bottle. Consider it a professional courtesy. Not many men walk through blizzards to save orphans. I just did what needed doing. That's exactly my point. They left the doctor's office as the last light faded from the sky. Mrs. Hutchins was waiting on the porch of her boarding house, a lamp in her hand. I've got soup on the stove and beds made up. The babies can share the room next to mine. I'll hear them if they cry in the night. Ma'am, I can't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering. Mrs. Hutchins fixed him with a look that brooked no argument. Now get inside before you freeze to death on my doorstep. Caleb followed her in. The boarding house was warm, clean smelling of wood smoke and fresh bread. A fire crackled in the main room. A long table held a pot of soup and a basket of biscuits. Sit, Mrs. Hutchins commanded. Eat. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks. The babies need. Miss Sinclair and I will handle the babies. You need food and rest, or you'll be no use to anyone. Nora was already lifting Lily from his arms. She's right. Sit down, Mr. Thornton. Caleb wanted to argue, but his legs were shaking and his shoulder was screaming, and the smell of that soup was making his stomach cramp with hunger. He sat. The soup was the best thing he'd ever tasted. Simple beef and vegetables and barley, but hot and filling and real. He ate 2 bowls before he even realized what he was doing. When he looked up, Mrs. Hutchins was watching him with something like satisfaction. Better, she said. Now, tell me about these babies. So Caleb told her. The wagon train. The massacre. Finding Samuel and Lily under their mother's body. The walk through the storm. When he finished, Mrs. Hutchins was quiet for a long moment. Their mama died protecting them, she finally said. That's a powerful thing, a sacred thing. Yes, ma'am. And you, a stranger, a man with no obligation, you carried them through hell to bring them here. Caleb shifted uncomfortably. I couldn't leave them. No. Mrs. Hutchins smiled, and her whole face transformed. I don't believe you could. From the back room, Lily started crying. Caleb was on his feet before he'd consciously decided to move. I'll... Sit, Mrs. Hutchins said firmly. Miss Sinclair has her. You need to learn that you can't do everything yourself. But Caleb couldn't sit. Couldn't stay still while Lily cried. He crossed to the doorway and looked in. Nora was walking Lily around the small room, rocking her, humming softly. Samuel sat on the bed, watching his thumb in his mouth, his eyes tracking every movement. She's all right, Nora said without turning around. Just fussy. She's been through a lot. I know, You can't sleep if she's not in your sight. I understand. Nora finally turned to face him. But you're going to collapse if you don't rest. When's the last time you slept properly? Caleb tried to remember. Before I found them. 3 days ago, maybe 4. Then go to bed, Mr. Thornton. I'll sit with them tonight. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. She smiled slightly. Besides, I'm too wound up to sleep anyway. Might as well be useful. Caleb hesitated in the doorway, torn between exhaustion and the fierce need to protect. Go, Nora said gently. They'll be here in the morning, I promise. He went, but he didn't sleep. He lay in the narrow bed in the room Mrs. Hutchins had given him, staring at the ceiling, listening for any sound from the baby's room. Every creak of the floorboards made him tense. Every gust of wind against the windows made him reach for the gun he'd hung on the bedpost. Old habits, hard habits to break. Sometime after midnight he heard footsteps in the hall. Soft, careful. Then a knock on his door. Mr. Thornton. Nora's voice barely above a whisper. Are you awake? He was on his feet, instantly pulling open the door. What's wrong? Is it Lily? Samuel? They're fine. Both sleeping. Nora stood in the hallway in her nightgown, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders, her red hair loose around her face. I couldn't sleep either. I thought maybe... She trailed off, looking uncertain for the first time since he'd met her. You want company? Caleb said. Is that strange? We barely know each other. No, it's not strange. He stepped back. Come in. I'll light the lamp. They sat on opposite sides of the small room, Caleb on the bed, Nora in the single chair, and talked in low voices while the night stretched on around them. She told him about Boston, about her mother's illness, the years of caring for her, the loneliness of watching someone you love fade away. About Edward Hartwell and the humiliation of being left at the altar. Everyone knew, she said quietly. The whole town. They looked at me with such pity, like I was damaged goods, like no man would ever want me now. They were fools. Were they? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm 34 years old, Mr. Thornton. I've never been married. I've never had children. In polite society, I'm what they call a spinster. Polite society doesn't know what it's talking about. She looked at him, then really looked at him, and something shifted in her expression. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? I don't know. When I first saw you bloody half-frozen carrying 2 babies through a blizzard, I thought you were either the bravest man I'd ever met or the craziest. Maybe both. Maybe. She pulled her shawl tighter. But underneath all that, you're kind. You're gentle. You look at those babies like they're the most precious things in the world. They are. That's what I mean. Nora leaned forward. A man like you, with your past, your pain, you have every reason to be hard, to be cold. But you're not. You carried 2 strangers' children through hell because you couldn't bear to leave them. That says something about who you really are. Caleb didn't know how to respond. No one had talked to him like this in years. Maybe ever. I'm not a good man, he said finally. I've done things. I don't care what you've done. Nora cut him off. I care about what you're doing now. And what you're doing now is saving 2 innocent lives. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Nora rose. I should go back. Check on the babies. Miss Sinclair. She paused at the door. Thank you, Caleb said. For stopping. For helping. For... He struggled to find the words. For not looking at me like I'm something to be afraid of. You're not, she said softly. You're something to be admired. She slipped out, closing the door behind her. And Caleb Thornton, who hadn't felt anything but grief and rage in 12 years, felt something new stirring in his chest, something that scared him more than any gunfight ever had. Morning came cold and bright, with Samuel crying for breakfast and Lily demanding to be held. Caleb dressed quickly and went to help. He found Nora already up trying to manage both babies at once, her hair escaping its pins and her face flushed with effort. "Here." He took Lily from her arms. "I'll handle this one." "Thank you. Samuel's hungry, but he won't eat unless I hold him a certain way." "Show me." She demonstrated, and Caleb watched, memorizing the angle of her arm, the way she cradled his head. He filed the information away like he used to file details about his bounty targets. "You're a quick learner," Nora observed. "Had to be in my line of work." "Your line of work was very different from this." "Not as different as you'd think. It's all about paying attention, reading people, knowing what they need before they know they need it." Nora looked at him with that assessing gaze. "You'd make a good father." The words hit him like a bullet. "I was a father once," he said quietly. "Wasn't very good at it." "You didn't have the chance to find out." "Maybe that's for the best." "I don't believe that, and neither do you." Before Caleb could respond, Mrs. Hutchins appeared in the doorway. "Breakfast is ready, and you've got visitors." "Visitors?" "Sheriff Walker, and someone else." Her expression was carefully neutral. "A Mr. Cornelius Wainwright. Says he's on the town council." Something in her tone made Caleb's instincts prickle. "What does he want?" "Didn't say, but I'd keep the babies close if I were you." Caleb handed Lily to Nora. "Stay here." "Caleb, just until I know what this is about." He found Sheriff Walker and another man waiting in the main room. Walker looked uncomfortable. The other man, Wainwright, looked like money. Expensive suit, gold watch chain, soft hands that had never done a day's hard work, and eyes that calculated the value of everything they saw. "Mr. Thornton," Wainwright extended his hand. "I've heard quite a bit about you." Caleb didn't take it. "Have you?" "Indeed. The whole town's talking about the man who walked through a blizzard with 2 orphans. Very heroic." "I don't know about heroic, just did what needed doing." "Modest, too." Wainwright smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I understand the children have no family, no one to claim them." "That's right." "A tragedy. Those poor innocents all alone in the world." Wainwright shook his head sadly. "My wife and I, we've always wanted children. Haven't been blessed in that regard. When I heard about these orphans, I thought, well, perhaps this is fate. Perhaps we could give them the home they deserve." Caleb felt his jaw tighten. "You want to adopt them?" "Is that so surprising? We have means, resources. We could give them every advantage. You don't even know them. Neither do you, Mr. Thornton." Wainwright's smile sharpened. "And yet, here you are playing nursemaid, a bounty hunter caring for infants. Surely you can see how inappropriate that arrangement is." Sheriff Walker stepped forward. "Now, Cornelius." "I'm simply stating facts, Sheriff." Wainwright spread his hands. "Mr. Thornton has no home, no steady employment, no wife. What kind of life can he offer these children?" "What kind of life can you offer them?" Caleb shot back. "You want them because they're convenient, because adopting 2 tragic orphans makes you look good." Wainwright's expression flickered just for a moment, but Caleb caught it. Surprise and anger. "I want them because I can provide for them," Wainwright said coldly. "Can you say the same?" "I can say I carried them through a blizzard while their mother's blood was still wet on my coat. I can say I held them through 3 nights of crying. I can say I know that Lily likes to be rocked to the left and Samuel won't sleep unless someone's humming." Caleb stepped closer. "Can you say any of that, Mr. Wainwright?" For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Wainwright smiled again, that cold, calculating smile. "We'll let the town council decide what's best for the children. In the meantime, I'd encourage you to think about what you really have to offer them, Mr. Thornton. A life on the run. A father who might be killed any day. Is that what those babies deserve?" He turned and walked out without waiting for an answer. Sheriff Walker let out a long breath. "I'm sorry about that. Cornelius is well, he's used to getting what he wants. He's not getting those babies. That's not up to me, the town council. Damn the town council. Caleb's hands were shaking. Those children aren't property to be handed around. They're people. They've already lost everyone who loved them. I won't let them lose anything else. Walker studied him for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. You might want to consider staying in town a while then. Putting down roots. Wainwright's argument about you having nothing to offer that carries weight with some folks. I don't have anything to offer. Then find something. Walker put his hat on. I've got a deputy position open. Steady pay. Respectable work. Think about it. He left. Caleb stood alone in the main room, his heart pounding, his mind racing. A deputy position. Staying in town. Putting down roots. Everything he'd spent 12 years avoiding. But then, he heard Lily crying from the back room, and Samuel's small voice saying, "Man, man," and none of that mattered anymore. He walked toward the sound of the babies, toward Nora's calm voice, soothing them toward something that felt terrifyingly like home. The next 3 days were the hardest of Caleb's life. Not because of the work, though caring for 2 infants was exhausting in ways he'd never imagined. Not because of his injuries, though his shoulder screamed every time he lifted Samuel. Because of the waiting. Wainwright hadn't made another move yet. But Caleb could feel him watching, could see the man's hired eyes following him whenever he walked through town with the babies. He's planning something, Caleb told Nora on the 3rd night. I can feel it. What can he do? He can't just take them. He's got money, power, connections. Caleb paced the small room. Men like him, they always find a way. Then we need to find a way to stop him. How? Nora was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Sheriff Walker offered you a job. Did you take it? Not yet. Why not? Because... He stopped. Because taking it means staying, and staying means committing, putting down roots, letting yourself care about something. He couldn't argue with that. Caleb. Nora rose and crossed to him, laying her hand on his arm. I know you're scared. I know the last time you let yourself love someone you lost them. But hiding from life isn't living. And those babies, they need someone who's willing to fight for them, to stay for them. What if I fail them? What if you don't? He looked at her, really looked at her. At the fire in her eyes, the determination in her jaw, the gentle strength that had drawn him from the first moment they'd met. Why do you care so much, he asked, about me, about the babies? You could have dropped us at the edge of town and been done with it. I could have. She didn't look away. But I didn't, because when I found you in that snow carrying those children, I saw something I recognized. What? Someone who's been alone too long. Someone who's forgotten that they deserve to be loved. The words hung between them heavy with meaning. I'm not... Caleb started. Don't. Nora cut him off. Don't tell me you're not worth loving. Don't tell me you're too broken or too damaged or too dangerous. I've heard all those excuses before, from myself. She reached up and touched his face. Gentle, careful. We're both broken, she said softly. But maybe broken pieces can fit together. Maybe they can make something new. Caleb stood frozen, her hand warm against his cheek, her eyes holding his. Then from the next room, Samuel's voice, Man, man. Caleb let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. I should go. Nora smiled. He needs you. Caleb went. But as he lifted Samuel from the crib, as the boy's arms wrapped around his neck, and his small voice said, Man, stay. Caleb knew something had changed. He wasn't just staying for the babies anymore. He was staying for her. The next morning, Caleb walked to the sheriff's office. Walker looked up from his desk when he entered. Made a decision. I want the job. Walker nodded slowly. Any particular reason for the change of heart? Several. Caleb met his eyes. Those babies need a father who can provide for them. Miss Sinclair needs... He stopped. This town needs someone who's willing to stand up against men like Wainwright. That's a dangerous position to take. I've been in dangerous positions before. Walker studied him for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk and pulled out a badge. Deputy pay is $30 a month. You work 6 days a week sunup to sundown. You enforce the law fairly regardless of who's breaking it. And you answer to me. Caleb took the badge. It was heavier than he expected. One more thing, Walker said. Wainwright's been making noise about bringing the orphan situation before the town council. Says he wants a formal hearing to determine who should have custody. When? 3 days from now. Caleb's grip tightened on the badge. I'll be ready. You'd better be. Walker leaned back in his chair. Because Cornelius Wainwright doesn't lose, not ever. And he wants those children. So do I. Then I hope you're willing to fight for them. Because this isn't going to be settled with guns and fists. This is going to be settled with words and law and public opinion. That's a different kind of battlefield. Caleb pinned the badge to his chest. Show me where to start. The next 3 days were a blur of preparation. Nora spent hours coaching Caleb on what to say, how to present himself. Mrs. Hutchins rallied support from the other townswomen. Even Doc Foster showed up one evening to offer his testimony about the baby's condition when Caleb had brought them in. That man walked through hell to save those children, Foster told anyone who would listen. I've seen soldiers with less determination. But Wainwright wasn't idle either. He held meetings at the bank, made donations to the church, promised improvements to the town school, the same school where Nora was supposed to teach. He's buying people, Caleb said grimly. Buying their loyalty. He's trying to, Nora corrected. But not everyone can be bought. The night before the hearing, Caleb sat alone with the babies after Nora had gone to bed. Samuel was finally sleeping through the night now. Lily's infection had cleared up completely. They were thriving, gaining weight, becoming more alert, starting to show the first hints of personality. Lily was a fighter. She grabbed for everything, demanded attention, screamed when she didn't get her way. Caleb loved her for it. Samuel was quieter, watchful. But every day he opened up a little more, said a few more words, smiled a little more easily. Just that morning he'd grabbed Caleb's hand and said, Pa. Not man, not mister. Pa. The word had nearly broken Caleb in half. I'm going to fight for you, he told the sleeping babies now. Both of you. I don't know if I'll win. I don't know if I have the right to be your father. But I know this, I love you. I love you like you were my own blood. And I will not let anyone take you from me, not without a fight. Lily stirred in her sleep, her small fist opening and closing. Samuel sighed and rolled closer to his sister, their bodies touching even in dreams. And Caleb Thornton, who had spent 12 years running from love, finally stopped running. Tomorrow, he would stand before the town council and fight for his family. Whatever it took, whatever the cost. He would not lose them. Not this time. The town hall was packed when Caleb arrived. Every seat taken, people standing along the walls, more crowded at the windows, craning to see inside. Word had spread fast, the bounty hunter versus the banker fighting over 2 orphan babies. Caleb pushed through the crowd with Nora beside him, Samuel in his arms, and Lily in hers. The babies were quiet, sensing the tension, their small eyes darting at all the unfamiliar faces. Pa, Samuel whispered, burying his face in Caleb's neck. Scared. I know, buddy. Me too. Caleb tightened his hold. But I've got you. Nothing's going to happen to you. Wainwright was already seated at the front, his wife Caroline beside him. She was younger than Caleb had expected, maybe 30, with a pretty face and empty eyes. She didn't look at the babies. Didn't look at anyone. Just sat with her hands folded like a doll someone had positioned and forgotten. The town council sat behind a long table. 5 men, all wearing their Sunday best, all looking uncomfortable with the attention. Sheriff Walker stood to the side, his badge catching the lamplight. Mr. Thornton. The council chairman, a gray-haired man named Harrison, gestured to a seat. Please. Caleb sat. Nora took the chair beside him. We're here to determine custody of the minor children Samuel and Lily Cooper, Harrison announced. Both parties have expressed interest in providing a home. We'll hear from each, then make our decision. This is absurd, Wainwright said smoothly. With all due respect to Mr. Thornton's heroics, the question of custody should be straightforward. My wife and I can offer these children everything: a proper home education, financial security. What can a former bounty hunter offer? How about we let Mr. Thornton speak for himself? Walker cut in. That's what a hearing's for. Harrison nodded. Mr. Thornton, please tell us why you believe you should have custody of these children. Caleb stood slowly. His heart was hammering, but his voice came out steady. I found Samuel and Lily under their mother's body. She died protecting them, used herself as a shield so they might live. When I pulled them out, Lily was barely breathing. Samuel hadn't spoken in hours. He paused, looking at the council members one by one. I carried them through a blizzard for 2 days. No horse, barely any supplies. I didn't know what I was doing, never held a baby before in my life. But I learned. I figured out how to feed them, how to keep them warm, how to calm them when they cried. Very admirable, Wainwright interrupted. But sentiment doesn't pay for food and clothing. Sentiment doesn't provide. I'm not finished. The words came out harder than Caleb intended. Wainwright's mouth snapped shut. I know I'm not a rich man, Caleb continued. I know I've got a past that some folks find troubling. But I also know this: those babies trust me. Samuel calls me Pa. Lily reaches for me when she's scared. They've already lost their parents once. I won't make them lose again. Pretty words, Wainwright said. But words don't. Mr. Wainwright. Harrison's voice was sharp. You'll have your turn. Let Mr. Thornton finish. Wainwright sat back, his jaw tight. I've taken the deputy position, Caleb said. I've got steady work now, steady pay. Miss Sinclair has agreed to help care for the children while I work. Mrs. Hutchins has offered us room at her boarding house for as long as we need. Miss Sinclair, Harrison turned to Nora. You're involved in this arrangement. Nora stood. I am. In what capacity? She hesitated. I care about these children. I helped bring them here. I've been helping care for them since. But you have no legal relationship to Mr. Thornton or the children. No, sir. Not yet. Not yet. Wainwright pounced on the words. What does that mean? Nora's cheeks flushed. It means we're getting married. The words left Caleb's mouth before he'd consciously decided to say them. The room went silent. Nora stared at him, her eyes wide. Married, Harrison repeated. Yes, sir. Caleb's heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear himself. I was planning to ask her properly, but since Mr. Wainwright seems so concerned about our arrangement, yes, we're getting married. Samuel and Lily will have a mother and a father, a real family. He turned to Nora. She was still staring at him. Her lips parted, her face unreadable. If she'll have me, he added quietly. For a terrible moment she didn't respond. Then slowly she smiled. Yes, she said. I'll have you. The room erupted. People talking, gasping, whispering. Mrs. Hutchins was openly crying. Doc Foster looked like he might fall off his chair. Order! Harrison banged his gavel. Order! It took a full minute for the noise to die down. Wainwright's face had gone red. This is obviously a ploy, a desperate attempt to... It's not a ploy, Caleb said. I love her. I love those children. And I'm willing to stand before God and this town and make that official. You've known her for a week. I knew my first wife for 3 days before I proposed. We were married 10 years. Would have been longer if... His voice caught. If she hadn't been taken from me. The room went quiet again. Mr. Thornton lost his wife and daughter, Walker said into the silence. 12 years ago. He's not a man who gives his heart lightly." Harrison studied Caleb for a long moment. Then he turned to Wainwright. "Mr. Wainwright, your turn." Wainwright stood adjusting his jacket, composing himself. "Gentlemen, I understand the emotional appeal of Mr. Thornton's story. It's very touching. But we must think practically. What kind of life can a deputy and a schoolteacher provide for 2 children?" He began to pace his voice, taking on the smooth rhythm of a practiced speaker. "My wife and I can offer these children everything they could ever want. The best education, travel, opportunity. They would want for nothing." "Except love," Nora said quietly. Wainwright froze mid-step. "Excuse me? I said except love." Nora stood, her hands shaking but her voice steady. "I've been watching you throughout this hearing, Mr. Wainwright. Not once have you looked at those babies. Not once have you asked about them, their health, their needs, their personalities. You've talked about what you can give them, but you haven't said one word about loving them." "That's ridiculous. Of course we would love—" "Would you?" Nora stepped forward. "Because I've seen the way you look at those children, like they're an acquisition, a business deal, something to be owned." Wainwright's face darkened. "How dare you?" "I dare because I've spent the last week watching Caleb Thornton learn to be a father. I've seen him walk the floor at 3 a.m. with a crying baby. I've seen him change diapers and mix formula and sing lullabies he barely remembers. I've seen him cry when Samuel called him Pa for the first time." Her voice rose passionate now. "That man doesn't have your money, Mr. Wainwright. He doesn't have your fancy house or your social standing. But he has something you will never have: a heart that breaks for those children, a soul that would die for them." "This is outrageous," Wainwright sputtered. "I won't be lectured by some spinster schoolteacher." "That's enough." Sheriff Walker's voice cracked like a whip. "One more word against Miss Sinclair, and I'll remove you from this hearing myself." Wainwright looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Walker's eyes must have warned him off. "I have nothing more to say," he said stiffly. "The council can make its own decision." Harrison leaned back in his chair. "Does anyone else wish to speak?" "I do." Mrs. Hutchins pushed through the crowd, her face flushed but determined. "Opal," one of the council members said, "you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." She planted herself in front of the table. "I've lived in this town for 40 years, raised 4 children here, buried my husband here. I know what makes a good parent and what doesn't." She turned to look at Wainwright. "I've seen you, Cornelius. Seen how you treat people, how you use your money like a weapon, how you look at anyone who can't do something for you like they're dirt beneath your boots. Now see here, I'm not finished." Her voice could have cut glass. "I've also seen Mr. Thornton these past few days. Seen him sit up all night with a sick baby. Seen him learn to change diapers without complaining. Seen him hold those children like they were made of gold." She turned back to the council. "Samuel Cooper called him Pa this morning, not because anyone taught him to, because that child knows in his bones, in his soul, who loves him, who would die for him." Mrs. Hutchins' voice broke. "Those babies have already lost their parents. Don't make them lose their father again." She walked back to her seat. The room was utterly silent. Harrison cleared his throat. "Any other testimonies?" "I'll speak." Doc Foster stood up, looking uncomfortable with all the eyes on him. "I examined those babies when Thornton brought them in. They should have been dead. By all rights, they should have frozen in that storm. But they didn't. Because that man—" he pointed at Caleb, "because that man wouldn't let them die." He looked at the council. "I've been a doctor for 20 years. I've seen parents who love their children and parents who don't. Caleb Thornton loves those babies. Anyone who can't see that is blind." He sat down. Harrison exchanged looks with the other council members. Something passed between them, some silent communication. "The council will deliberate," Harrison announced. "Everyone else clear the room. We'll announce our decision within the hour." Caleb's stomach dropped. An hour. An hour to decide the fate of his family. "Come on," Nora took his arm. "Let's wait outside." They filed out with everyone else. The babies clutched close and waited on the steps of the town hall while the council deliberated inside. The longest hour of Caleb's life. People kept coming up to them, some offering encouragement, some just staring. A few Wainwright's supporters glaring with open hostility. Samuel had fallen asleep against Caleb's shoulder. Lily was awake, watching everything with curious eyes. "Did you mean it?" Nora asked quietly. "Mean what? The proposal, or was it just—" She swallowed. "Just strategy." Caleb turned to look at her. At this woman who'd appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. Who'd challenged him and supported him and made him believe he might actually deserve happiness. "I meant it," he said. "Every word. We've known each other a week. I know. I'm difficult, stubborn. I talk too much when I'm nervous, and I can't cook worth a damn. I know. Then why? Because when I look at you," Caleb said, "I see home. For the first time in 12 years, I see a place I want to stay." Nora's eyes glistened. "That's either the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me," she whispered, "or the saddest. Maybe both. Maybe." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Yes." "Yes what?" "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll help you raise these babies. Yes, I'll build a life with you in this frozen little town." Samuel stirred against Caleb's chest. "Mama." They both froze. The word hung in the air between them. He said. Nora's voice was barely a whisper. "Mama," Samuel said again, lifting his head to look at Nora. "Mama, stay?" Nora's face crumpled. She reached out and touched Samuel's cheek, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, baby," she said. "Mama stays." Samuel smiled a real smile, the first one Caleb had seen, and laid his head back down. Caleb couldn't speak. His throat was too tight, his heart too full. This was his family now. Whatever the council decided, whatever Wainwright did next, this was his family. And he would fight for them until his last breath. The door opened. Sheriff Walker stepped out, his face carefully neutral. "They've made their decision." Caleb stood, pulling Nora up beside him. His heart was hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. "And?" Walker didn't answer, just held the door open. They walked back inside. The council was seated behind their table. Harrison stood as they entered. Wainwright was already in his seat, his face pale, his jaw clenched. Something had happened. Something had changed. "Mr. Thornton, Miss Sinclair?" Harrison's voice was formal. "Please be seated." They sat. "The council has deliberated," Harrison continued. "We've considered the testimonies, the circumstances, and the best interests of the children." He paused. Caleb stopped breathing. "It is the decision of this council that custody of Samuel and Lily Cooper be granted to Caleb Thornton, and upon their marriage to Nora Sinclair." The room exploded, cheering, crying, people rushing forward to congratulate them. Caleb couldn't move, couldn't process, could only sit there holding Samuel while tears streamed down his face. They'd won. After everything, the blizzard, the fear, Wainwright's money and influence, they'd won. Nora threw her arms around him. Lily squished between them, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. "We did it," she gasped. "Caleb, we did it. You did it." He pulled back to look at her. "That speech you gave, I just told the truth. That's exactly what I mean." Mrs. Hutchins fought her way through the crowd to embrace them. Doc Foster shook Caleb's hand. Even Sheriff Walker cracked a smile. But Wainwright. Caleb saw him standing at the back of the room, watching them with an expression that made his blood run cold. Not anger, not disappointment, calculation. The look of a man already planning his next move. "This isn't over," Wainwright said quietly, catching Caleb's eye across the crowded room. "Not by a long shot." Then he turned and walked out, his wife trailing silently behind him. The celebration continued. But Caleb couldn't shake the chill that had settled in his gut. Wainwright had lost the legal battle. But something told Caleb the war was just beginning. Later that night, after the celebrations had died down and the babies were asleep in their cribs, Caleb sat with Nora on the porch of the boarding house. The moon was full, casting silver light across the snow-covered street. It was cold, but neither of them suggested going inside. "He's not going to give up," Caleb said. "Wainwright, I saw his face." "I saw it too." Nora pulled her shawl tighter. "What do you think he'll do?" "I don't know, but a man like that, a man who's never been told no, he won't take this lying down." "Then we'll be ready." Caleb looked at her. At this woman who'd agreed to share her life with him, to raise 2 orphans who weren't hers, to stand against a powerful enemy just because it was right. "I don't deserve you," he said quietly. "Probably not." She smiled. "But you're stuck with me now. I can live with that." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Nora said, "We should set a date. For the wedding. Soon. Before Wainwright can try anything else." "How soon?" "Tomorrow." She laughed. "That might be too soon, even for us." "Then a week. We can ask Reverend Stone to perform the ceremony." "Reverend Stone?" Nora's voice was thoughtful. "The Friedman preacher." "Is that a problem?" No, I just..." She shook her head. "I grew up in Boston. Things were different there. Segregated. This isn't Boston. Out here, a good man is a good man regardless of the color of his skin. Stone's one of the best men I've met in this town." "Then yes. Let's ask Reverend Stone." From inside a small cry, Lily waking for her midnight feeding. Caleb started to rise, but Nora put her hand on his arm. "I'll go. You rest." "Nora. We're partners. Now remember? That means sharing the work." She stood and kissed his forehead, including the 3 a.m. parts. She went inside. Caleb sat alone on the porch, listening to her footsteps till Lily's cry fading, as Nora picked her up to the soft sound of humming as she began to feed the baby. This was his life now. A week ago, he'd been a drifter with nothing but ghosts for company. Now he had a family, a purpose, a future, and enemies who wanted to take it all away. Caleb touched the badge on his chest. Whatever came next, whatever Wainwright planned, whatever dangers lay ahead, he would be ready. He'd spent 12 years running from his past. He was done running. Time to stand and fight. 3 days after the hearing, the boarding house burned. Caleb woke to screaming. Not Lily's cry or Samuel's whimper, a different kind of scream. Primal, terrified, coming from everywhere at once. Smoke. He smelled it before he saw it. Thick, acrid, filling his lungs. "Nora." He was on his feet, instantly lunging for the door. "Nora." The hallway was chaos. Smoke pouring from somewhere below. Mrs. Hutchins in her nightgown shouting orders. Other boarders stumbling past, coughing, panicked. Caleb ran to the baby's room. Nora was already there. Samuel clutched to her chest, reaching for Lily with her free hand. "I've got her." Caleb scooped Lily up. "Move. Now." "The stairs." Too much smoke. The window. He grabbed Nora's arm and pulled her toward the window at the end of the hall. The glass was already hot to the touch. "Stand back." He kicked it out. Cold air rushed in, mixing with the smoke. Below, people were gathering in the streets, shouting, pointing. "Jump. It's only 1 story. I'll go first, catch you." "Caleb. Trust me." He handed Lily to her, climbed onto the sill, and dropped. The impact jarred through his legs, but he stayed upright. "Now, Nora, drop Samuel first." She didn't hesitate, lowered the boy as far as she could, then let go. Caleb caught him. Samuel screamed, then buried his face in Caleb's neck. "Lily, quick!" Nora dropped the baby. Caleb caught her too, barely his arms full of crying children. "Your turn." Nora climbed onto the sill, her nightgown billowing in the wind. She jumped. Caleb couldn't catch her, not with both babies in his arms. She hit the ground hard, cried out, clutched her ankle. "Are you..." "I'm fine. Go, help Mrs. Hutchins." Caleb thrust both babies into her arms and turned back to the building. The front door was engulfed now, flames licking up the wooden frame, smoke pouring out in thick black waves. "Mrs. Hutchins?" he shouted. "Opal." No answer. "Someone hold my badge." He ripped it off and tossed it to a man in the crowd. "If I don't come out in 2 minutes, don't come after me." "Caleb, no!" Nora's voice desperate, but he was already running. He hit the back door at full speed, shoulder first. It gave way. Inside was hell smoke so thick he couldn't see his hand in front of his face, heat that seared his lungs with every breath. "Mrs. Hutchins?" A cough. Faint. Coming from the kitchen. Caleb dropped to his knees. The air was slightly better near the floor, and crawled toward the sound. She was there. Collapsed near the stove, her nightgown smoldering, her face covered in soot. "Come on." He grabbed her under the arms. "We're getting out." "The others?" "Everyone's out. You're the last one. Move." He half-carried, half-dragged her toward the back door. The ceiling was groaning above them. Something cracked a beam, giving way. "Go!" He shoved her through the doorway, just as a section of roof collapsed behind them. They tumbled into the snow, coughing, gasping. Hands reached for them, other townspeople pulling them away from the burning building. "Is she—" Nora's voice frantic. "She's alive." Caleb rolled onto his back, sucking in cold air. "She's okay." "You fool." Nora was crying, clutching the babies, her face streaked with tears. "You absolute fool. You could have died." "Didn't, though." "That's not the point." But she was holding his hand now, squeezing so hard it hurt. And Caleb knew she wasn't really angry. She was terrified. They all were. The boarding house burned until dawn. By the time the fire was out, nothing remained but charred timbers and smoking rubble. 40 years of Mrs. Hutchins' life gone in a single night. She sat on a barrel across the street, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, staring at the destruction with empty eyes. "I built that place with my husband," she said quietly. 40 years ago. Raised my children there. Buried Walter from the front parlor." "We'll rebuild," Caleb said. "The whole town will help." "With what money?" Her voice was bitter. "Insurance won't cover half of it. And at my age, you're not alone, Opal." Nora sat beside her, one arm around her shoulders. "We'll figure it out together." Sheriff Walker appeared through the crowd, his face grim. "Caleb, a word." They stepped away from the others. "This wasn't an accident," Walker said quietly. "I found lamp oil around the foundation. Multiple points of origin. Someone set this fire deliberately." Caleb's blood went cold. "Wainwright." "Can't prove it. Not yet. But it was him. He lost the hearing, so he's punishing everyone who stood against him." "Maybe. Or maybe he's trying to run you out of town. No place to live, no support system might make you reconsider taking those babies and moving on." "I'm not going anywhere." "I know that. But he doesn't." Walker glanced toward where Wainwright's bank stood at the end of Main Street. "Be careful, Caleb. A man like that, a man who'd burned down a boarding house with women and children inside, he's not going to stop." "Neither am I." The next few days were a blur. Reverend Stone opened his church as temporary shelter for the displaced boarders. Mrs. Patterson at the cafe provided meals. Other townspeople donated clothes, blankets, whatever they could spare. But underneath, the community support tension simmered. Half the town was convinced Wainwright was behind the fire. The other half thought Caleb had brought trouble to Copper Ridge, that none of this would have happened if he'd just kept moving. "You should hear what they're saying at the saloon," Doc Foster told him. "Some folks think you're cursed. Say everyone who gets close to you ends up hurt." "Maybe they're right." "Don't be a damn fool." Foster's voice was sharp. "You didn't start that fire. Wainwright did. And if good people don't stand up to men like him, he wins. Good people already got hurt. Mrs. Hutchins lost everything. And she'd lose a lot more if you left. Those babies would lose everything." Foster fixed him with a hard stare. You want to honor the people who've helped you stay. Fight. Win. Caleb found Nora in the church that evening, sitting alone in a pew, while the babies slept in a makeshift cradle nearby. You're thinking about leaving, she said without looking up. I can see it on your face. The thought crossed my mind. And he sat beside her. And I'm not going anywhere. Good. She finally looked at him. Because I didn't agree to marry a coward. You agreed to marry a man who gets people killed. Stop. Her voice was fierce. Stop blaming yourself for things other people do. Wainwright set that fire, not you. Wainwright put those children in danger, not you. If you hadn't what saved 2 orphans from freezing to death, found a woman who loves you, built a life worth living. She grabbed his hands. Caleb Thornton, you listen to me. The only person responsible for evil acts is the person who commits them. You are not cursed. You are not poison. You are a good man who bad things keep happening to. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. She pulled him close, pressing her forehead to his. And I'm going to spend the rest of our lives proving it to you. From the cradle, Lily let out a small cry. They both turned. Samuel was awake too, sitting up, reaching for them. Pa, he said. Mama, scared. Caleb lifted him up while Nora took Lily. I know, buddy, but we're here. We're not going anywhere. Bad man. Caleb froze. What? Bad man. Samuel's eyes were wide. Saw bad man. Fire. Nora and Caleb exchanged a look. Samuel, Nora said gently. What bad man? Where did you see him? Window. Samuel pointed. Bad man at window. Then fire. What did the bad man look like? Samuel scrunched up his face, thinking hard. Shiny. Shiny here. He touched his chest. Shiny. Like a watch chain. Like the gold watch chain Wainwright always wore. Dear God, Nora whispered. Caleb's hands were shaking. He saw him. Samuel saw Wainwright at the window before the fire started. A 2-year-old's testimony. It's enough. It has to be enough. He was already moving Samuel, still in his arms. Caleb, wait. I'm not waiting. He turned back, his face hard. That man tried to kill my children. He's not getting away with it. Then we do this right. Nora caught up to him. Lily clutched to her chest. We go to Sheriff Walker. We build a case. We don't give Wainwright any excuse to claim persecution. And if Walker can't do anything, then we find another way. But we do it together. She met his eyes. You promised me, Caleb. You promised you'd stay. That means staying smart, not just staying angry. He wanted to argue, wanted to storm down to Wainwright's bank and beat the truth out of him. But Nora was right. She was always right. Together, he said finally. Together. Sheriff Walker listened to Samuel's account with growing anger. That son of a bitch, he muttered when they finished. I knew it was him, but I couldn't prove it. Samuel saw him. A 2-year-old Caleb. Any lawyer worth his salt will tear that testimony apart. Then we find more evidence. Someone must have seen something. Someone must know something. Maybe. Walker stood and grabbed his hat. I'm going to question Wainwright's staff, his wife, anyone who might have information. I'm coming with you. No, you're staying here with your family. Walker fixed him with a hard look. This is my job, deputy. Let me do it. He left. Caleb paced the small room Reverend Stone had given them, unable to sit still, unable to think straight. You're going to wear a hole in the floor, Nora observed. I can't just sit here. Yes, you can. You have to. She nodded toward the babies. They need you calm. They can feel your tension. She was right. Samuel was watching him with wide, anxious eyes. Lily had started fussing. Caleb forced himself to stop pacing, to breathe, to sit beside Nora and let her lean against him. I keep thinking about Clara, he said quietly. About Rosie. I wasn't there to protect them. I was off chasing glory, chasing vengeance, and they died alone. You're here now. Am I? Or am I doing the same thing again, letting my anger drive me, putting everyone at risk? You're not. Nora took his face in her hands. Look at me. You're not the same man you were 12 years ago. That man would have already gone after Wainwright with a gun. That man would have chosen violence over patience. Maybe that man was right. No, he wasn't. Violence begets violence. Revenge doesn't heal, it just creates more wounds. She stroked his cheek. You want to honor Clara and Rosie, be the man they deserved. The man who protects his family. The man who builds instead of destroys. Caleb closed his eyes. I don't know if I can. You can. You already are. She kissed him softly. I see it. The children see it. The whole town sees it. You just have to start seeing it yourself. The door burst open. Walker stood in the doorway, breathing hard, his face pale. You need to come with me. Now. What happened? Caroline Wainwright. She's at the doctor's office. She's talking. Caroline Wainwright sat on Doc Foster's examining table, her face a mask of bruises. He did this? Caleb's voice was barely controlled. Not directly. Her voice was flat, emotionless. He hired men. Same men who set the fire. Why are you telling us this now? Caroline looked up, and for the first time Caleb saw something in her eyes. Not fear, not resignation. Rage. Because he promised me children, she said. When we married 5 years ago, he promised me a family. But every time I got pregnant, her voice caught. He gave me something, in my tea, some kind of medicine. I lost 3 babies before I realized what he was doing. The room went silent. He never wanted children, Caroline continued. He wanted the appearance of wanting children, the sympathy, the social standing. She laughed bitterly. He wanted those orphans for the same reason, not because he loved them, because they would make him look good. Why didn't you leave? Nora asked gently. And go where? With what everything I have belongs to him. Even this. She touched her bruised face. Even this is his. His property. His possession. Not anymore. Walker stepped forward. Mrs. Wainwright, if you're willing to testify, we can put your husband away. For the fire. For what he did to you. For all of it. He'll kill me. Not if I can help it. Caleb moved to stand beside Walker. You have my word. Whatever happens, we'll protect you. Caroline studied him for a long moment. The bounty hunter turned deputy. The stranger who'd walked through a blizzard to save 2 children he didn't know. My husband called you a fool, she said. Said you'd ruined everything by keeping those babies. Maybe I did. No. A ghost of a smile crossed her bruised face. You showed me what a real man looks like. What a real father looks like. My husband would never have done what you did. He would have ridden past that wagon train without a second thought. She stood slowly, wincing. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. About the fire. About the babies About the babies. Her voice broke. He doesn't deserve to destroy anyone else's family. Caleb felt Nora's hand slip into his. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Caroline's eyes were hard now. Cornelius doesn't go down easy. When he finds out I've betrayed him, a gunshot. Everyone froze. Then another, and another, coming from outside. Stay here. Caleb drew his pistol and ran for the door. The street was chaos. Wainwright stood in front of the bank, a rifle in his hands, firing into the air. Thornton, he bellowed. I know you're out there. I know what my wife is doing. Come face me like a man. People were screaming, running for cover. Caleb could see Sheriff Walker across the street, pistol drawn, trying to get a clear shot. Wainwright. Caleb stepped out into the open. Put the gun down. Why? So you can take everything from me, my reputation, my wife, my children. They were never your children. They should have been. Wainwright's face was twisted with rage. I built this town. I made it what it is. And you, some drifter, some nobody, you come in and... He swung the rifle toward Caleb. Time slowed. Caleb saw the barrel coming around, saw Wainwright's finger tightening on the trigger, saw his own death approaching in the space between heartbeats. Then a shot rang out. Not from Wainwright, from behind Caleb. Wainwright staggered, the rifle dropping from his hands. He looked down at the blood spreading across his chest, then up at something over Caleb's shoulder. You, he gasped. Caleb turned. Caroline Wainwright stood in the doorway of Doc Foster's office, a smoking derringer in her shaking hands. 5 years, she said, her voice eerily calm. 5 babies, 5 chances at a family, and you took them all from me. Wainwright collapsed to his knees. Caroline, don't say my name. She walked toward him, the gun still raised. You don't get to say my name ever again. I did it for us. You did it for you. Everything was always for you. She stopped in front of him, looking down at the man who had destroyed her life. Those children, the Thornton children, they'll have what I never could. A family, love, a father who would die for them instead of kill for himself. Wainwright fell forward, his blood staining the snow. He didn't get up. Caroline let the derringer fall from her fingers. It's over, she whispered. It's finally over. Sheriff Walker took her arm gently. Mrs. Wainwright, I'm going to have to... I know. She didn't resist. I know what I've done. I'm ready. As Walker led her away, Caleb felt Nora's arms wrap around him from behind. Is he... dead? Caleb turned to face her. It's over. She saved your life. I know. What happens to her now? I don't know. That's for the court to decide. He pulled her close, breathing in her scent, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. But right now, all I care about is that you're safe. The children are safe. We're safe, she whispered. We're all safe. Behind them in Reverend Stone's church, Samuel and Lily were sleeping, unaware that the man who'd wanted to tear their family apart was lying dead in the street. Unaware that the nightmare was finally truly over. Caleb held Nora tighter and felt something loosen in his chest. For the first time in 12 years, he could breathe. The trial lasted 3 days. Caroline Wainwright stood before the territorial judge, her bruised face healing but still visible. Her voice steady as she recounted 5 years of abuse, manipulation, and loss. She told them about the babies she'd been forced to lose, about the fire her husband had ordered, about the men he'd hired to terrorize the town. By the time she finished, half the courtroom was crying. The judge deliberated for less than an hour. Mrs. Wainwright, he said, his voice solemn, this court finds that you acted in defense of others. The charges against you are dismissed. Caroline swayed on her feet. Caleb caught her arm, steadying her. It's over, he said quietly. You're free. Free. She laughed, but there was no joy in it. I don't even know what that word means anymore. You'll learn. Nora stepped forward, taking Caroline's hands. We all will. Together. After the trial, the town began to rebuild. Wainwright's assets were seized, his bank taken over by the territorial government. The money he'd hoarded went to his victims. Mrs. Hutchins received enough to rebuild her boarding house twice over. I don't want his blood money, she said when they told her. It's not his anymore, Sheriff Walker replied. It's yours. Use it to build something good. So she did. The new boarding house rose from the ashes of the old, bigger and better than before. Mrs. Hutchins insisted on naming one of the rooms after Caleb. You saved my life, she said when he protested. Let me honor that. I was just doing what anyone would. No. Her voice was firm. You did what most wouldn't. There's a difference, Caleb Thornton. It's time you learned that. The wedding was set for the first Sunday of spring. Reverend Stone agreed to perform the ceremony. The whole town was invited. Even Caroline Wainwright, who'd decided to stay in Copper Ridge rather than face the whispers and judgment that awaited her back east. "There's nothing for me there," she told Nora. "No family, no friends, just memories I'd rather forget." "Then stay," Nora said. "Help me with the school. The children could use another teacher." Caroline's eyes widened. "You'd trust me with children after everything." "I'd trust you because of everything. You know what it's like to want a family and be denied one. You'll appreciate those children in ways others can't." Caroline cried, then really cried for the first time since her husband's death. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me as something other than his wife. You were always more than that. You just forgot." The night before the wedding, Caleb couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed at the new boarding house, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with everything that had happened and everything that was about to change. A knock at the door. "Come in." Nora slipped inside, closing the door behind her. She was wearing her nightgown, her red hair loose around her shoulders. "You should be sleeping," she said. "So should you." "I couldn't." She sat on the edge of the bed. "Too much thinking." "About what?" "About tomorrow. About us. About whether I'm ready to be a mother." She laughed softly. "I've never even held a baby before I met you. Now I'm about to become a mother to two." Having second thoughts. "No." She reached for his hand. "Not about you, not about Samuel and Lily. Just nervous. The normal kind of nervous." "I don't know what normal feels like anymore." "Neither do I." She squeezed his hand. "But maybe we can figure it out together." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Caleb said, "I keep thinking about Clara, about Rosie." Nora didn't flinch. "Tell me." "I wonder what they'd think. If they'd be happy that I'm moving on, or if—" his voice caught. "Or if they'd feel betrayed. Clara loved you. Rosie loved you. You think they'd want you to spend the rest of your life alone and miserable?" "No. But—" "No buts." Nora shifted closer. "Love isn't finite, Caleb. Loving me doesn't mean you love them less. Loving Samuel and Lily doesn't erase Rosie. There's room in your heart for all of us." "How do you know?" "Because I've watched you." She touched his face. "I've watched you with those babies. The way you hold them, the way you talk to them, the way your whole face changes when they laugh. That's not a man whose heart is full. That's a man whose heart is finally healing." Caleb pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not." He could hear the smile in her voice. "But you're stuck with me anyway." "I can live with that." "Good. Now go to sleep. You're getting married tomorrow." She kissed him softly and slipped out. Caleb lay back down, and for the first time in weeks, he slept without nightmares. The wedding day dawned clear and cold. Half of Copper Ridge crowded into Reverend Stone's small church. The other half waited outside, craning to see through the windows. Caleb stood at the altar in a borrowed suit, feeling like a fool and not caring. Sheriff Walker stood beside him as best man. Doc Foster sat in the front row with Mrs. Hutchins. Caroline Wainwright held Lily, who was grabbing at the flowers in her hair. And Samuel stood at Caleb's feet, clutching the ring box like his life depended on it. "Pa," he whispered, "I'm scared." Caleb knelt down. "Me too, buddy." "Really? Really. But sometimes being scared is okay. It means something important is happening." "Mama's important. The most important." Caleb straightened Samuel's tiny collar. "You ready to help me marry her?" Samuel nodded solemnly. "Ready." The church doors opened. Nora stood in the doorway, and Caleb forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple white dress. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, but she glowed. Her red hair was pinned up with wildflowers. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. She walked toward him slowly alone. No father to give her away, no bridesmaids to accompany her. Just Nora. Just his future. When she reached the altar, she took his hands. "Hi," she whispered. "Hi. You clean up nice. So do you." Reverend Stone cleared his throat. "If you two are finished." Laughter rippled through the congregation. "Dearly beloved." Stone began, his deep voice filling the small church. "We are gathered here today to witness the union of two souls who found each other in the most unlikely circumstances." He looked at Caleb and Nora with warm eyes. "I have known many couples in my years as a minister. I have married some who loved deeply and some who married for convenience. But I have never seen two people more clearly meant for each other than the two standing before me now." He paused. Caleb Thornton came to this town as a stranger carrying two orphaned children through a blizzard. He could have left them. He could have ridden past that wagon train and never looked back. But he didn't. Because this man, this so-called bounty hunter, this drifter, has a heart bigger than he knows. Caleb felt his throat tighten. And Nora Sinclair came to this town fleeing her past, convinced she was unworthy of love. She found a broken man and broken children, and instead of running, she stayed. She fought. She loved. Stone smiled. "Some say love is blind. I say love is brave. These two have shown us what it means to love bravely, to choose each other, despite fear, despite pain, despite every reason the world gives us to stay alone." He turned to Caleb. "Caleb, do you take this woman to be your wife, to love and cherish in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" Caleb looked at Nora, at her bright eyes, her trembling smile, the love written across every inch of her face. "I do," he said, "with everything I am and everything I have. I do." Stone turned to Nora. "Nora, do you take this man to be your husband, to love and cherish in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do." Her voice was steady. "Today and every day after, I do." "Samuel," Stone said gently. "The rings, please." Samuel stepped forward with exaggerated care, holding the box like it contained the most precious thing in the world. "Here, Pa," he said proudly. "Good job, buddy." Caleb took the rings and handed one to Nora. They exchanged bands, simple gold, nothing fancy. And as Caleb slid the ring onto Nora's finger, he felt something click into place, like a lock finally finding its key. "By the power vested in me by God and the territory of Colorado," Stone said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." He smiled. "Caleb, you may kiss your bride." Caleb pulled Nora into his arms and kissed her. The church erupted, cheering, applause. Samuel jumping up and down, shouting, "Mama, Papa!" Lily shrieking with excitement in Caroline's arms. When they finally broke apart, Nora was crying. "You're stuck with me now," she said through her tears. "Wouldn't have it any other way." The celebration lasted well into the evening. There was food, more than the small town could possibly eat. Music from a fiddle and guitar. Dancing in the street despite the cold. Caleb danced with Nora, then with Mrs. Hutchins, then awkwardly but determinedly with Caroline Wainwright. "Thank you," he told her, "for everything." "I should be thanking you." She glanced at where Nora was dancing with Samuel in her arms. "You showed me what a real family looks like, what a real man looks like." "I'm not." "Yes, you are." She squeezed his hand. "Nora is lucky to have you. Those children are lucky to have you. Don't ever let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." Later, much later, after the celebration had wound down and the babies were asleep, Caleb and Nora stood together outside the small house Sheriff Walker had helped them rent. Their first home together. "Mrs. Thornton," Caleb said, testing the words. "Mr. Thornton," she smiled, "has a nice ring to it. You think, I know." She leaned against him. "What happens now? Now we live, we raise those babies, we build something good. Simple as that. Nothing simple about it. He wrapped his arm around her. But we'll figure it out. Together. Together. From inside the house, Lily let out a small cry. Then Samuel's voice. "It okay, Lily. Papa and Mama here. We safe." The crying stopped. Nora laughed softly. "He's going to be a good big brother." "He already is." They stood in silence watching the stars. "I was thinking," Nora said finally, "about names." "Names? If we have more children." She looked up at him. "I thought maybe if it's a girl we could call her Clara. Or Rose." Caleb's breath caught. "You'd do that. They were your family. They should be remembered." She touched his face. "What do you think?" "I think—" His voice broke. "I think that's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever offered me." "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes." He pulled her close. "Clara Rose Thornton, if we're blessed with a daughter, and if it's a boy—" "Thomas," Nora said quietly. "After Samuel and Lily's father." Caleb nodded, unable to speak. They'd lost so much, both of them. But here in this moment, holding each other under a sky full of stars, surrounded by the family they'd built from nothing. It felt like enough. More than enough. 6 months later, the adoption was made official. Samuel and Lily Cooper became Samuel and Lily Thornton in a small ceremony at the same church where Caleb and Nora had married. The judge who presided was the same one who'd freed Caroline Wainwright. "Mr. and Mrs. Thornton," he said, "it is my privilege to declare that Samuel Thomas Thornton and Lily Rose Thornton are now legally and forever your children." Samuel didn't fully understand what was happening. But when Caleb knelt down and said, "You're officially my son now, buddy," the boy threw his arms around his neck. "Always your son, Papa," he said. Always. And Caleb, who'd spent 12 years believing he'd never be a father again, held his son and wept. The years that followed weren't easy. There were hard winters and lean summers. There were nights when the babies wouldn't sleep, and days when money was tight, and moments when Caleb wondered if he was doing anything right. But there were good times too. Samuel's first day of school walking hand in hand with Nora, while Caleb watched from the doorway of the sheriff's office. Lily's first word, "Papa," shouted across the kitchen while Caleb was trying to make breakfast. The night Nora told him she was pregnant, her hands shaking as she pressed his palm against her still flat belly. "Another Thornton," she said. "What do you think?" "I think—" He swallowed hard. "I think I'm the luckiest man alive." Their daughter was born on a spring evening, arriving with a cry that echoed through the small house. "She's perfect," Doc Foster said, laying the baby in Nora's arms. 10 fingers, 10 toes, lungs like a bellows." "Clara," Nora whispered, looking up at Caleb. "Clara Rose Thornton." Caleb touched his daughter's tiny face and felt something he'd thought he'd lost forever. Wholeness. Samuel and Lily crowded around, peering at their new sister with wide eyes. "She's little," Samuel observed. "You were little once too," Caleb told him. "Was not." "Were too. Tiny as a field mouse." "Nuh-uh." Nora laughed and the sound filled the room with warmth. This, Caleb thought. This is what home sounds like. On Clara's first birthday, Caleb walked alone to the cemetery at the edge of town. He knelt before 2 stones he'd had placed there months ago. Simple markers carved with names and dates. Clara Thornton, beloved wife. Taken too soon. Rose Thornton, precious daughter. Forever in our hearts. "I brought you something," Caleb said quietly. He laid a small bouquet of wildflowers between the stones. "From your namesake. She's walking now. Has your eyes, Clara, that same stubborn set to her jaw." He paused. "I'm happy. I know that probably sounds strange. For a long time I thought I'd never be happy again, thought I didn't deserve it." He touched the cold stone. "But Nora, she showed me different. And Samuel and Lily, they needed me. needed someone who would fight for them. His voice broke. I couldn't fight for you. I wasn't there, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I promise, I'm being the man you deserved now. The father Rose deserved. I'm staying. I'm fighting. I'm loving with everything I have. He stayed there for a long time, kneeling in the spring sunshine, talking to ghosts. When he finally rose, Nora was waiting at the cemetery gate. You okay? She asked. Yeah. He took her hand. I am now. They walked home together. 20 years later, Caleb Thornton sat on the porch of the house he'd built with his own hands, watching the sunset paint the Colorado mountains gold and rose. His hair was gray now. His hands weren't as steady as they'd once been, but his eyes were still sharp, and his heart was fuller than he'd ever dreamed possible. Samuel came out and sat beside him. 22 years old now, tall and strong, wearing a deputy badge of his own. You okay, Pa? Just thinking. About how I almost rode past that wagon train. Caleb shook his head. Almost kept going. Would have if I hadn't seen that doll in the snow. But you didn't keep going. No, I didn't. Samuel was quiet for a moment. Then, I don't remember much about that day. About Mama, my first Mama. But I remember you. Remember feeling safe for the first time. Remember knowing even then that you wouldn't let anything hurt us. You were 2 years old. Some things you remember in your bones. Samuel looked at him. I never thanked you properly, for stopping, for saving us, for being our father. You don't have to thank me. Yeah, I do. Samuel's voice was thick. Because you didn't have to do any of it. You could have left us, could have dropped us at the first town and kept riding. But you didn't. You stayed. You fought. You loved us. Caleb reached over and gripped his son's shoulder. Best decision I ever made. The door opened, and Nora appeared gray-haired and beautiful, their youngest grandchild, Samuel's daughter, on her hip. Dinner's ready, she said. Lily and her husband are here. Clara's setting the table. You two planning to sit out here all night? Just enjoying the view, Caleb said. The view will still be here tomorrow. She smiled. Your family's inside. Your family. Caleb stood his knees protesting and looked through the window at the chaos within. Lily arguing with her husband about something unimportant. Clara laughing as she tried to corral her 2 boys. Mrs. Hutchins, 90 years old and still sharp as a tack, holding court from her chair by the fire. Doc Foster, retired now, but still showing up for every family gathering. His family. Built from nothing, forged in fire, held together by love and stubbornness and the simple refusal to give up. Coming? Nora asked. Caleb took her hand, the same hand he'd held on their wedding day, the same hand that had steadied him through countless storms, the same hand that had helped him build this life. Yeah, he said. I'm coming. They walked inside together, and the door closed behind them. Caleb Thornton had spent 12 years running from his past, believing he was cursed, believing everyone he loved would be taken from him. He'd been wrong. Love wasn't a curse. Love was the only thing that mattered. And on this ordinary evening, surrounded by the family he'd found and fought for and built from nothing, Caleb finally understood the truth he'd been searching for his whole life. You weren't meant to walk alone. You were meant to find your people, your place, your purpose. And when you did, when you finally stopped running and let yourself love, that was when life truly began. Not with a gunshot or a grand gesture, but with a choice to stay, a choice to fight, a choice to love even when it terrified you. Caleb Thornton had made that choice on a frozen Colorado ridge, lifting 2 dying babies from their mother's arms. And he'd kept making it every day since. He would keep making it until his last breath. Because that's what family meant. That's what love meant. That's what home meant. and Caleb Thornton, drifter, bounty hunter, broken man, had finally found all three.